culmination of my early rowing career was I think the summer after graduate school. We went to the NWIRA regatta, huge regatta. I raced in the single, I raced in the 8, I raced in the double, I raced in the quad, I raced in the straight 4, I raced in the quad 4, I raced in the 500 meter 8 dash and the 500 meter single dash. So there were 8 events, and I won all of them. And it was like I was on top of the world in Winnipeg, Canada.
Everybody, welcome back. Well, thanks, Steve. Everybody, welcome back to Fast Friends. Tonight we have what we affectionately called in 2008 the Bow Jedi, the Bow Ninja, one of the most technically savvy rowers to ever walk the planet. Well, since maybe Luke Walton. So luckily we have Luke here to have a little rivalry. But we are really glad that if you've been waiting for Fast Friends to come back, that we're back. We're ready to go. We have an awesome guest. And like Aaliyah said, it's been a long time. We shouldn't have left you without a dope beat to step to. So tonight, I'm really excited to have one of the best human beings to ever row a boat, the most fun teammate you can have to get you through the worst days, and truly somebody that is the epitome of the word fast friend, Matt Schnobrich. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm embarrassed already and blushing, so we're off to a good start.
Well, good thing you had that modeling career that can help you with the smile.
Now we're into it. That didn't take long.
No, it didn't. Hey, Pinterest came on and basically told me how ugly I was. At least I said you were a model. So for intros for the Fast Friends fans out there, this is Luke Walton's first time meeting Matt Schnobrich and Justin Favors meeting Matt Schnobrich. And it's really exciting to kind of bring these different groups of excellent rowers together. But Steve and I had the pleasure of rowing with Matt in 2008. And because of that, Steve is going to read your hype reel and Justin's going to have a little reprieve. And Steve, let's see what you got.
Oh, you were serious?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're dead serious. Or you can pitch the show in your very fun way again and tell everyone to like and subscribe 8 times.
Well, no,
I'm not prepared
I think
for the bio, so yes, Steve.
You're not prepared. No, I mean, welcome, Matt. And at the end, I don't know if you were so much. Were you Waldorf or Astor? Because at the end of it, you were you and Bo were the angry guys from the Muppets. At the end of it, you
Statler and Waldorf. Yeah.
Statler and Waldorf.
I don't know where one ends and the other begins, so let's just leave it at that.
So Matt Schnobrich, good teammate, didn't start rowing until college at St. John's University in Minnesota. Never rowed competitively before stepping onto Lake. How do you say it's
Sagatagan? Lean into it, Steve. Yeah,
Sagatagan.
And majored in engineering. Broke his way on the national team in 2005 from Penn AC. Made the U.S. Olympic team in 2008. Won a bronze medal in the men's 8 with Dan and I. And then afterwards, just, like Homer Simpson, just walked right back into the bush and retired to an awesome career down in Kentucky with his wife and kids. And you've been working for the same company the whole time, right?
I have.
Matt?
I finished grad school and defended the thesis in late summer of 2004, and then had a good friend, my best buddy from home, got married. Was in their wedding, packed up the truck the next Monday, and drove out east. And then I got a job with my current firm about a month after that. So. And then it's been all the way through since 2004.
For the audience,
awesome.
for the bio, for the bio that I don't have prepared, for the audience, Matt's an engineer, I believe. Yeah.
Yep.
And,
Yeah, okay.
and owns a lot of animals.
What field of engineering?
I'm an environmental engineer.
There you
So it's a branch of civil. My undergrad was at St. John's, like Steve indicated, biology and Spanish majors, and then went to grad school at the University of Minnesota. So environmental engineering is, I do a lot of soil and groundwater hazardous waste cleanup. So it's, commercial facilities, manufacturing plants, federal facilities, Army bases, that sort of thing. So
Right on. Go Gophers.
And
Yeah.
All right.
I can't place it. Is that your menagerie, Matt, or is that Justin?
It's definitely not mine. My kids are asleep. They don't sound like that.
not mine either. Yeah.
That's Luke. That's Luke. From what? It's me.
No, I've got nothing going on here.
No,
Not a
Is
sound.
that you, Steve?
no, it's Matt's.
It's not over here.
Really?
There's like phantom dogs. Yeah.
That's wild. It's not me.
Can you guys hear something right
Weird.
now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we hear a lot
Dogs
going
and
on.
talking.
A lot going on behind you, Steve, Luke.
I got nothing.
Somebody's
Luke?
mic is picking up a whole different conversation. This is wild. Anyway,
and my microphone isn't making any noises, or it's not lighting up when I'm not talking. So
well,
That's
Let's move-
wild.
let's move.
That's awesome.
let's move. Let's move on. The ghost.
Fuck
the
it.
ghost
We'll
of
do
the
it
machine.
live. Fuck
Yeah,
it.
we'll do
we'll
it
do
live.
it live.
All right. So, pleasantries aside, we are gonna have fun with this Shnobi because we are rusty, which is really great. And so one of the reasons why I was excited to have you on is because of your ability to really be that teammate through. If you're in the boat with you, it's never gray. Let's put it that way. And to start this off in the traditional way, we really want to know, why do you think you're here?
Oh, why am I here? Through rowing, I was really lucky to make a lot of really good friends, right? I think as you step away from rowing, the one thing that I probably miss the most is driving into the boathouse and walking up and seeing everybody and hanging around on the dock or in the in the bays for 15, 20 minutes as everything comes together. And then you're out in the water and it's, 6:30 in the morning and the sun's coming up and it's the best place to be. Right. So, I mean, my joy in going to those places, whether it's Mercer or Princeton or anywhere else, was always about, the camaraderie. Right. And luckily that translated to lifelong friendships. And here we are leaning into, reconnect and reminisce on all the things that we went through and probably saw from a different vantage point.
That was such an engineer response.
No, it was a good answer. It was a good answer.
I didn't say it was a bad answer. You judging engineer, Steve?
Yeah. But Matt, you opened up, you popped on and you said, "Howdy fellas. First time, long time." Right? Like, it's like we're starting a radio show. And your question was, what's new for season 3? And I think for us, what's awesome about this show that we've found is we're walking everyone through the same story, right? But everyone's experience is different, and everyone's pathway through the same story is different. So, the show, is, to use the phrase, the show is evergreen in the sense that, we just need a guest and, who's got a yarn to tell. And, we already had your father-in-law on. So now you're racing him.
Only because Mariah wasn't available.
Right. So, I think let's get it rolling and, tell us a little bit about the life before, right? Like why St. John's? Like, tell us a little bit about like the ordinary life of Matt Schnobrich before rowing.
No, that's probably a good place to start.
So I went to an all boys military high school in Minnesota. I grew up playing soccer and hockey, and I speed skated, and I played basketball, and I did, a variety of things, baseball, did everything. And got to high school and tried to make the hockey team as a sophomore. And, for those of you who are familiar with Minnesota high school hockey, it's pretty legit. And I was a pupa of a young boy. So I'm 6'5", but I grew 6 inches when I was a college freshman. So as a high school sophomore, I was, I didn't have a hair on my leg. And I remember sitting in the last tryout trying to make the JV hockey team, and I was sitting between Ryan Malone and RJ Schreifer, and both of them were seniors. Ryan was fully bald, and RJ Schreifer was an adult man, and I was sitting in between them, and I had no business being in that locker room, and I didn't make the team. What I found, and so after hockey, it was kind of like I had nothing to do in the winter, right? And I've always been a person that has tried to fill my time with various things, whether it's athletics, whether it's reading, whether it's art, whatever it is, right? I am an extrovert, and I get energy from engaging people and kind of being active, right? So I decided to pick up kind of on a whim cross country skiing, which alternative sports, right? From a high school kid standpoint, right? It's not football, it's not basketball, it's going to be on the cross country ski team. So it was an untread path. But I mean, from being a hockey player, that translates pretty directly into skate skiing. I had been a downhill skier too, so it kind of came naturally, and we had a pretty outstanding high school cross-country ski team. And I go through all that just because of the fact that, I mean, that was probably, if I had not done that, I probably would have never found rowing, right? Because rowing was kind of the next alternative sport that in a small liberal arts school without a coach and a club program, right? That was why I joined rowing, was because it was going to be fun and it was going to be a bunch of guys splashing around in a boat, right? But, cross-country skiing is a sport where it is an individual sport. You're out in the woods and you are grinding it out, and it really teaches you a lot about kind of mental toughness and how to push yourself and how to find additional gears and next levels and go after it, right? So I mean, I think that was it was in the kind of gestation of what ultimately became kind of my interest in rowing too, which I then picked up for a very similar reason at St. John's. It was I wasn't going to walk on the soccer team because I had 4 science labs that were 4 hours long, and the thought of like playing a D3 sport while doing all sorts of science classes was pretty daunting. And my RA was across the hall, and he was on the rowing team, and he saw me, and he invited me out, and there was nothing that was going to be a conflict at 6 a.m. in the morning. So and I jumped in with a whole bunch of other guys who had never touched a blade or touched an oar in their lives. We started rowing. I think we had 3 practices, and then we threw the boats on a trailer and drove down to the Head of the Elk in Elkhart, Indiana. For those of you who have seen the Head of the Elk. So I had been rowing for literally a week, and we rolled in with this trailer, and we passed by, it was Wisconsin and Michigan and Notre Dame and Iowa and, rowing powerhouses. Okay. Wisconsin. Yeah. But I, for a club team from St. John's who had sat in the boat for all of a week, right? It was eye opening, right? It was like, wow, are we really doing this? Are we going to race these guys? And I think our first race, we didn't get last, but we got second to last, and the last place team was a high school 8 that didn't finish, and we got beat by several other high school 8s that beat us. I think we probably had no less than 3 seats come off the track because they would get caught in the basketball shorts, and we didn't have a coach, so we didn't know how to make adjustments. Right, the tracks actually move, right? So if you got a short kid. If you get a tall kid, we shared the boat with the women, right? So the lightweight women would row the 8s, and then it would come in, and we'd jump in, and we wouldn't even change the boat and the rigging, and everybody's seat came off. So that was kind of my collegiate rowing experience for the first couple of years. But it was a blast. We like, I was a 19-year-old kid driving a 15-person van with a trailer full of boats, like across 3 or 4 states, and I had absolutely no business doing that at midnight, right? Through construction zones, but I mean, that's what we loved about it, right? And it was, we didn't practice a lot, we weren't very good, but it was a club sport, and that's what it's about. It was, we liked the friends, and we had a good time doing it, and it kept us coming back for it. But anyways, I mean, there was a pivot point where it was kind of like after our excuse me, after our sophomore year. I grew up in the Twin Cities, right? So St. John's is about an hour and a half north of the Twin Cities. So the Minneapolis Rowing Club was about a half mile from our house. And at some point, one of the guys on our team had jumped in and rowed over the course of the summer. And he came back as we were sophomores, and he was a heck of a lot better. And he knew everything about how to rig and how to make adjustments. And it was like the clouds parted, right? And so that following summer, I joined him, and we were coached by a great group of guys that was they would have been young fathers, a lot like us, late 30s, early 40s, but still around rowing and interested and wanting to kind of instruct the next generation and teach a bunch of kids from liberal arts club programs how the heck to do it. And so we got progressively better over the course of that summer. And then by the time that I did the same thing my junior summer, and by the time that we were seniors, we had a 4 that had at least 3 out of the 4 guys had all been rowing in the summer. We'd been coaching. We'd been to nationals once or twice. And we're doing better. And we went to the Head of Charles that fall, and that was probably, so I mean, we saw our circuit was the Head of the Mississippi. Have any of you guys been to the Head of Mississippi?
No.
Top 2, huge regatta. It's amazing. I love rowing the Head of the Miss, but I mean, we did the Head of the Miss. We would do the Head of the Elk. We do the Head of the Iowa, and then we'd have our SAG sprints. So the other thing about the glorious Lake Sagatagan is it is 1,200 meters end to end. Okay, so we would row 4s and 8s. And we would have to do a figure
prime
8
training
turn.
For LA. It's prime training for LA.
We'll probably get
the
to
last
my
100 meters is a prayer anyway.
You know what? That 2007 fall NSR that I won with Matt Deacon, it all came down to stake turns that I was doing on Lake Sagatagan. So no, but we had to do
secret.
We had to do figure 8s, and that was the only way that we could row 2,400 meters in a consecutive way. So, but anyways, we got to go. We went to the Head of Charles as in fall of our senior year. I think we got 15th place out of 65 in the Club 4, and got an automatic entry, and that was like absolutely unheard of, right? We beat every other boat from Minnesota. Like, we beat St. Cloud State and the University of Minnesota and St. Thomas, and that we'd never beat those guys before. So we felt that it was all of that made the experience exactly what it needed to be, where it was just, we liked the sport, we liked the people, we liked being outside, and it was just a sense of adventure. So
did you drive the bus? Did you drive the boat out, or did you borrow a boat?
Boston. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
We would take 3 to 4 hour shifts, but I mean, we drove that thing straight through. So it's, again, here's a bunch of college kids in a 15-person bus. And, this day and age, if my kids told me that they were going to do that, I'd probably have second thoughts, but we didn't think anything of it. And it made the experience what it was.
So I'm envisioning it. It's a great. I'm just seeing your van on Sturo Drive right now. But
oh yeah, did you accidentally go down one of those like low
tunnel through underpass?
We made it.
You made it.
This was back in the days where all the big boats were down at Magazine Beach. So it was a little more accessible on that side.
Oh, good.
It actually is. It actually isn't.
It isn't? Okay.
That's one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons why I moved it. That so that where the
All right.
Sitco sign is, there's a walk bridge that is like danger coming along that side from Riverside. So coming in, you had to come off of the Brighton exit and then come across the BU bridge and then go around this roundabout under the bridge to get to Magazine Beach. And so one of the biggest reasons why they moved it up towards Northeastern is that one, there was more parking lot space versus ruining the grass of Magazine Beach. That was really upsetting the soccer players. And two, there were less overpasses for boat trailers to get stuck under.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah, because we went a couple of years ago.
Because idiots like you coming from Minnesota not knowing to drive a boat trailer to the Charles.
We had no incident. It was, you know what? I would Midwest confidence. So
I love it. To
segue, it is no worse than August 31st, where everybody rents a U-Haul for the first time in college to move out of their apartments, and they drive the U-Hauls down. So it's
same.
You're not alone. Like people who hit a boat trailer are not alone.
Fair enough. But just going back, Matt. So I hear you on like the journey with the club program progressively getting better and better over the course of your time as a collegiate athlete, club athlete, however you want to phrase it but I would say, like, where was the pivot for you though, where you're like, you know what, like this is legit. I think I'm gonna like take this a little further than an automatic entry to next year's Charles. Like, at what point were you like, that's cool, but like, where were you like, I need more than that to kind of continue on?
Yeah. So so after
obviously we know the outcome.
St.
That's
John's,
why I gotta rewind it. Right?
Yeah. No, so when I finished St. John's, I moved back to the Twin Cities. I lived in a house with my good buddies from back home, and took a year and worked at Cargill as an analytical chemist, which was just ridiculously exciting. And then went back to grad school at the University of Minnesota, right? So that's all in the Twin Cities. I kept rowing at the Minneapolis Rowing Club, right? I was a person who just, I'm doing this with studies and grad school and work, but I wanted, rowing's really good about shared guilt, right? And kind of like the commitment that you make to your boat mates or your training mates, that like once you know that they're going to be there, that's just going to get you up in the morning and it's going to get you there. So I would have been a grad student, living a transitional adulthood life, right? It's 22 or 23 years old, and but I would still roll out of bed at 5:45 and be down at the boathouse at 6, and we'd be on the water at 6:15. And it was all the guys in the Minneapolis Rowing Club, right? It was, and we could have been in quads or straight fours or a lot of singles and then pairs. So, and then we just did for kind of those summers, we would do the U.S. Nationals circuit. We would never went to Canadian Henley. We always kind of chose one of the two. And did nationals, and then there was a regatta that was always the Northwest International Rowing Association. And if you've never seen the trophy, you should look it up. It's like existed for 150 years. Was made by the same guy who made the Stanley Cup. So it's this giant silver trophy that's about as tall as all of us. And the NWIRA regatta was kind of like this Midwest end of summer championship race, right? So that was our pond, right? Was kind of these Midwest races, and at some point you jump over and do nationals. So I just kept doing it and rode pretty consistently 4 to 5 days a week. I spent a lot of time in the single, and at some point, kind of during grad school, it all kind of clicked, and I got faster in the single, and I don't even know what my top finish at the nationals would have been, but I would have finished top 3 or top 5 or something. And so it's not like I was ridiculously fast in the single. But then I had a good pair partner, John Olson, who I had rode with, and we did relatively well in the pair. So, this senior pair or intermediate pair events or whatever. And so the culmination of my early rowing career was I think the summer after graduate school. We went to the NWIRA regatta, huge regatta. I raced in the single, I raced in the 8, I raced in the double, I raced in the quad, I raced in the straight 4, I raced in the quad 4, I raced in the 500 meter 8 dash and the 500 meter single dash. So there were 8 events, and I won all of them. And it was like I was on top of the world in Winnipeg, Canada. But there were enough people in kind of that group. I was finishing grad school, and there were enough people there who kind of said, look, you're done with grad school, you're looking for jobs. If you ever wanted to go out east or something, or head to Boathouse Row or head to another place, it could be good for you. You're big enough, and you never know where it'll go. So I think all the friends that I live with at home, they all got married in about a 6-month period. So, our kind of bachelor pad was coming to a close, and grad school was over, and it was time for an inflection point. And I think I told everybody when I left Minnesota that it was, I'm going to try this. And if I get to wear the flag on my uniform just once, that would be absolutely amazing. And if I don't get to do it, I'm going out and having a good time and meeting people, and I'll be home in a year. And I haven't been back to Minnesota since 2004. So
Very cool.
Dude, that's so epic. The historical context you just gave of what club rowing once was in the United States is I find myself getting a little emotional. I think that's the nostalgia of the show. And we're just talking about the the changing of the guard at US rowing. So there's like this really present moment of the sport. And I think you're such a beautiful byproduct of 2 amazing things that rowing has lost, is club rowing and making club rowing so accessible.
Yeah.
And 2, walk-on culture and making rowing so accessible. And it's very maddening to see how joyful you have your early experiences to rowing. Because as like a Fairfield County junior rower, I'm just like, I was always just so full of anxiety. Like
Yeah,
it's just
my bingo
it's such
card
an
today.
interesting, juxtaposition.
On my bingo card, I never would have guessed that someone was going to use the word joy and Princeton and Mercer in the same sentence. But that happened earlier in this discussion. That happened. It was the word joy, and I was like, "Oh, what are you joyful about?" And then he said Princeton and Mercer, and I got lost. I got really lost in that.
Oh my God! It's like there's such a lack of, for lack of a better word, generational trauma that your rowing story has compared to some of the not only junior rowers, like the data that I feel like we've collected on the show of this, like how rowing at a younger age makes you so more intense because just the measuring of it. And plus where the erg came into existence in the late 90s as well. Like it wasn't a tool before them either. But just the fact that like the racing that you did, like the idea that you could go to a race and just get 8 races in and have, you basically had a Michael Phelps moment. But here's the thing is like in a small scale, but that feeling, right? That emotional neuron that was built on the feeling of being able to do all that winning in that environment. I think it just really allowed you to take that risk to say, F it, I'm going to try. And I think that's the most beautiful thing that I do love about the Olympic movement is like any American can try. It's an open and fair trial. Like you just got to show up and try. And I think that's what's really exciting about this from my standpoint, because everything you said is so beautiful and articulate that leads to the person that was fun to row with, is that you brought this joy to the whole process. And so we all have this joke that 1 year in Princeton in 2000, like that 2001 year, a lot of people have said was the most brutal. So those of us that went on beyond 2001 or before 2001, and you're coming into 2004 where like they just won gold and set a world record too. So then I'm just trying to think of your entry point into this, into American rowing as well. At Penn AC, where like Dan Beery came from, and Boathouse Row was really popping off at that point with like producing some consistent talent. Like you had Kurt Borchenane coming out of there. You had
Mike Worley.
Mike Worley, you know, you have the Whirly Bird at 2 Olympic cycles. Mike is from Vesper. So the fact that you dropped this like Minnesota like young man with this wide-eyed joy of rowing, and you get dropped into Philly in 2004. I can't wait to hear about that huge culture shift. Like, what was that like when you went from like, hey, Matt, come and try this, to probably was like, the fuck do you want here, kid?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, so I mean, I grew up in the Twin Cities, which is, you know, it's certainly not Philly from a city culture standpoint, right? Nowhere's like Philly from a city culture standpoint.
I don't think Twin Cities would beat up a delivery robot.
Yeah, but I mean, again, it was kind of a sense of adventure for the most part, right? I'm doing something that's totally new. I'm taking my U-Haul and I'm going to roll into art museum. And my roommate was Craig Dodson, who was one of my friends from back home too, and had gone to St. Thomas, which is kind of a same conference as where I went for my undergrad at St. John's. I had known Craig at Minneapolis. We roomed together, and I remember pulling in with the U-Haul, and he wouldn't leave that thing unattended because everybody was going to walk away with all my stuff. And it kind of sunk in real quick that it was like, oh, I'm just walking 20 feet over there. I'm sure it's safe. He's like, nope, it's not going to stay open. So Philly was a gritty place, and it was that area in our museum was really kind of in a transition point from, having historically been a little more transient, and it still had parts of that. But I mean, now our museum it's a beautiful place, right? It's totally gentrified and it's changed. But it was at a moment where there was, we had brew pubs, and we had Philly flavors, and we had Fairmount for breakfast, and all that was great. But that group of guys in Philly was really unique, right? So, I mean, you touched on it with the kind of walk-on culture, right? For people like me, and I, so since Beijing, I've been in Kentucky for 15 years, and I'm not around a lot of rowing a lot, right? So we don't have a lot of these conversations, and Philly for me was kind of, there was this whole group of people that you get to move to a city that you don't know anybody, and you sign up for you're going to show up on Monday morning and train with them, and these are going to be my friends, right? But it was a great group of people. So I mean, I was really fortunate that group of people was kind of there. A lot of them were carryovers from the 04 cycle, so had kind of tried for 04, and we're going to do another cycle for Beijing. And you kind of drop into a group of similarly minded, similarly aged people with the same priorities, where we're going to, we're going to work as many hours as we can during the day, and we're going to row hard on the bookends, and we're going to buy a 30-pack of PBR on Saturday night and enjoy each other. So that walk-on culture, though, that's part of that, right? So I mean, if that was going to be our path, right? It's liberal arts or small school kids that have not done the junior national team, have not been to the development camps, are not on anybody's radar, right? And that was the group, right? It was a whole bunch of people from D3 schools that were from similar programs that had all done, reasonably well in college, and we're trying to make that next step.
Who picked up the phone for you? Who called someone at Penn AC and said, I got this guy? How was that introduction?
So there were a couple people in Minneapolis. So Andrew Morrow, who's still around there, he was one of Mike Taty's assistant coaches back in the day at Princeton. but they're in Minnesota. Patrick Johnson was another guy who had rowed. He had been at pair trials a few times, light double, and James Dundon. So those kind of three guys were the guys that coached for me in Minneapolis, and they had found Kurt Browder's information at Penney. So Kurt Browder picked up the phone. What's your score? And I think I was like, I don't know, I'm 6:15 or 6:20 last time I pulled one. He's like, all right, well, we'll get faster. But yeah, they welcomed me with open arms, right? That's the nature of those programs, that it's like, hey, I'm going to commit to this. I'm going to do this for at least a year. And they're like, all right, bring it on.
I love the stories, when I have people ask me, right, and I'm in it. They're like, how do I do it? I'm like, all right, are you ready to, just on a whim, move across the country and, pack it up and go? And go sublet an apartment in Philly, or go sleep under a pool table for a couple months, or, tell them these stories. I love having it on the record where you're like, just do that.
Is it because it makes you feel less clinically? Does it make you feel less clinically crazy, Steve? Like, oh, it wasn't just me that decided. I mean, Luke. So have you heard Luke's episode, Schnobi?
I haven't. No.
Okay, so I'm going to paraphrase this because it ties into the idea of, to your point. One of the things I love, like when we catch up, is that for you, it's like you're out of rowing. So not only did you come into it late, kick ass, and then walk away into the sunset, right? You have lived in Kentucky where it's not really that rowing immersive culture. And so Luke, Steve, and I have stayed vocationally in it since the time we started, and Justin stepped away too. So it's always fun to but now Justin's been like knee deep in it for the past 2 years again with the show. And I think what I'm leading to is you have this really amazing perspective of rowing being this really incredible moment. And a lot of what we're looking at is like how incredible this moment in time was for the depth of rowing in the country. And that because of that depth and that access, someone like you shows up. And I really want to point to the audience is that you made this decision to move to Princeton in 2004, saying it'd be so wonderful to wear the flag. And I have never heard that story. Like your true patriotism in the moment. Like, I think that really hit a beautiful nerve of like the idea of like you get to go represent your country in the most positive lens. And in less than a year in Gifu, Japan, you do that. You do exactly that, right? I would love to know. Sorry, I didn't paraphrase Luke's story. Thank you, friends.
Luke, it's a great story about yourself.
Yeah. Well, now I
I'm
totally
looking forward to hearing it.
Now I totally spaced what I was going to say.
I was looking forward to hearing
it.
You're just going to talk about him moving back across the country.
I know you're
country. Yeah,
about
Steve. See, that's I talk to Steve every day. He finishes my thoughts.
Luke being
Steve,
truck
Luke,
driver. Yeah,
boom. Yeah, Luke went cross country 3 times. Like the craziness of like.
Luke, why don't you tell a paraphrase of your story? It's your story.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking directly to the joy of Princeton and Mercer, it was the fall and winter of 02-03, and I was having a terrible time. It was not going well. It was pretty clear that I was not really going to be considered in the Princeton Training Center in that environment. I wasn't thriving. It wasn't working for me, and I wasn't performing. And so I just washed right out and just called Mike and said, "Hey, I don't think this is working for me." And he said, "Okay," as Mike would. And then I left and drove back to San Diego, where I'm originally from. And along the way, and on sort of within 24 hours of leaving, I got a call from Artur, who became my pair partner after that. We had rowed in the Cox 4 in the summer of 2002. And he's like, "Hey, I'm in Boston. We got a small group training. You want to come back?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know." And this and that. I got back to San Diego. I spent a couple of days, turned right around and went back. So it's kind of that, Is that where you're going with it, Dan? I don't
No,
know where Dan's
yeah,
going with
Yeah,
that.
but you got to illustrate it. You
But
got to illustrate it.
that's
It's
what
amazing.
happened.
Yeah,
But it's
a-
amazing in a
but it's a
2026
calling.
hold on.
Yeah.
It's amazing
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
2026 context. Luke did this in a Jeep with MapQuest, with burn CDs. This is the great part of the story that he listened to 82 times. There was no cell phones like really going on. Like it wasn't like an iPhone in every pocket. So again, it's just a moment in time in the 2026 context. Like, yeah, whatever, back and forth. It's a lot different when you say like I drove across the country like within a week twice. So
Yep.
I think go back to it, Dan. I think Matt.
Did you unstaple the map quest and just reverse the map to go back?
No, I
Or
had
did you look at the map? Or did you flip? Did you flip
I was
backwards?
just flipping
to
through the
map?
pages, so you
Yeah,
know, I
yeah.
was kind of trying to keep up where I was supposed to be.
Steer,
you know?
steer it
And
with
did
your
you
knee.
listen to
Steer the car with your
Yeah.
knee while you flip the page. Yeah, it's but
Yeah, with
and just
talking to Artur with my hand on my cell phone. So yeah,
there you go. Yeah, exactly. But no, so now, so go back, Dan.
but
I
only
think
nights and weekends. But only nights and weekends.
That's
only
correct. I
nights-
had to wait for the
after
sun to
7,
go down
after
before I
7,
started making my
whatever
calls.
it was. But no, Matt.
So
Like,
where are we going with this part of the story then?
no,
I'm
hold on.
lost.
I'm not.
Somebody tie
Where
this
we're
together.
going,
Yes,
Dan.
bring it back.
Dan was going was there was a just this leashed freedom to do these types of things, right? And there was an ability to say like I'm going to commit, I'm going to go do this, and there was no baggage, right? Because you were uninhibited, you were at that point in your life. And then because of that, which I also have a question on, of like there was obviously some pivot to say like, okay, I'm in this arena now with these types of guys. I'm sitting in boats, I'm sitting next to people, and if you do a little bit of a rewind, you are sitting next to those two dudes who I'm assuming were NHL players or big time hockey players. I'm not a hockey guy. In between the two, but now you're actually supposed to be there, right? Or you have a permission to be there. And so with that, I think Dan, you can pick it back up now. You're down in Philly, you're making a go of it. Luke's story was really just to kind of illustrate you're not the only one who had this uninhibited ability to just do up and go. But I think that you're in it. I'd love to know though, like where was that pivot to be like, okay, I'm hanging with. I'm assuming you're getting to the point where like, all right, I'm hanging with these guys. How does that kind of play itself out? Where are you like, all right, I'm really making a run of this. Like this isn't just like a hope and a dream of like if I could wear Stars and Stripes one day to like shit, I'm here. I don't know if you've gotten to that point at this point in time yet, but you were there, and you were down the street from Princeton. So yeah, I would love to kind of pick it up from there. And Dan, I don't know if that's where you were going, but I tried to tie it as best to bow as I could.
Thanks for landing the plane for Dan, Justin.
Yeah, no problem.
It's
No problem.
yes, I try to squeeze in a lot. Thank you. And this is why you have a team. Everybody is for when you fuck up, they save your ass.
Oh, good.
Schnobrich, to me, it's just really impressive that in a year's time, you went from being the new guy to the guy. And it was obvious based off the speed that you were able to create as the guy. And so you make the national team as an unknown, like literally an unknown a year later. And so what's fun as the kind of veteran at this time and space is like, holy shit, here comes one. Like I could see that you were going to be a contender for the Olympics probably before you did.
I'd probably agree with that. Yeah.
And so it's just really fun to see this backstory from somebody who literally I have the same result with 3 years later. And it's just, so it blows my mind to hear it from that timeline that you went from so curious using the words joy to like just developing in grad school. And then within a year's time of that commitment, you are the guy at Penn AC. So that's kind of like to Justin's point in landing that plane is how fast did that happen is all I really want to know.
So there's probably there's a few things that I can unpack now, and we can unpack the joy of Princeton and Mercer at some point a little later because we'll get to that, I'm sure.
But I probably never knew that. I never thought I was the guy until I was in the boat in Beijing or going to Beijing. So that I would say. But I was really, you're right. I was 25, right? So I mean, I'm jumping into that environment as a 25-year-old, where most of you, were there a lot sooner, right? And at a younger age. So I mean, what that did for me is, one, it made me really naive, right, of what I'm dropping into. But I mean, because I'm naive, I'm not preoccupied with, is this guy faster than me, or how is Mike going to make choices, or how does this? I didn't have anything in the rear view, right, to be worried about, or negative experiences where you had been through the process and you knew how it could go. Had I gone for a second cycle, that would have certainly been on my mind, right? You see people that come back and you see that, well, okay, they were amazing in 04, and then for whatever reason, it's injury or life or whatever, right? There's things that come up that kind of shuffle the deck a little bit, and that's how it goes from cycle to cycle, right? That's and when we do it on a shoestring budget, right, without the big Olympic endowment that's now there, it adds anxiety, it adds pressure to kind of that whole situation. So the fact that I was naive was unique, right? Because it kind of insulated me from any preoccupation, right? I'm here, I'm going, I'm showing up tomorrow, and I'm going to pull, right? The other thing is, I got my job at my current firm that the fall I moved there, right? And I worked 32 hours a week between practices. So it was like 6 to 7 hours a day on average, usually. And that was like, so I lived, so the first year I trained in Tennessee, we made the pair in 05 in Gifu, and then I moved to the camp kind of that winter, and then started driving back and forth from Philly to Princeton. But I worked in Newtown, which was like 45 minutes north of Philly. So I always had like a 45-minute or an hour block between practice and work, where it's like you can kind of clear your head and then you go to work. And it's like I worked using my grad degree, and because I kind of had both of those things, right? I had this life at work where I knew I was in my career already, and I never felt like I was putting anything on hold, right? So that was another thing that I think weighs on people, is like, well, I'm going for the cycle, and this is 4 years, and I'm putting my career off, right? So so now it's like this really black and white decision for some people, where they have to choose, right? And then it just amplifies the pressure, right? Well, I've chosen this, I've invested in this, I'm making all these sacrifices, and I was, based on how it worked out for me, like I felt like I never had that kind of that there was never that amplification of the stress for me, because I knew, like, okay, if I get cut this year, well, I got my job, and I like that, I know where that's going. So
life goes on.
I didn't have anything to lose a little bit, right? So I was naive, and I didn't have anything to lose, right?
That's huge.
But one other thing to just kind of respond to, at Tennessee, I never thought I was the guy either, right? I got to row with Pat O'Dunn. So we trained in the fall. So Tennessee, I went from training 4 or 5 times a week in Minnesota, and all of a sudden we're training 12 or 13 times a week, right? So just the volume was double, right? Or triple, right? We're rowing longer, we're doing weights, we're just all of that training volume really built on kind of what I had. But then in the spring, I got with Pat O'Dunn, and the pair moved, and I had always rowed small boats, right? Or like where I actually learned how to row and become effective was in singles and pairs. So that was another different entry point that I had, where it's not, now I'm dropping in that. And if we're rowing pairs for 90% of the year, like, I know how to move a pair, right? So and that was where matching up with people and like, I felt I always had a strength in a pair matrix, because I could jump from partner to partner, and I was pretty malleable in terms of just trying to find rhythm and find speed. So at Tennessee, it was like that first year, it was Pat O'Dunn was the engine, and I sat behind him, and I matched up, and we found speed that way, and that's kind of what drove it all forward. So, but I mean, when we finally did join the camp, I mean, Mike Tatey, I think, looked at me and said, "Well, you're going to be out of here soon." And now I got Pedro done, and he's the big erg, and he's going to move it. So I felt like coming into camp, right, not being the big erg guy, I always felt like I had to move the boat, and I had to figure it out, right, with partners, with teammates, to make sure that those results were always going to be in my favor, because when we got into the winter, I was not on the front end of the bell curve from a 3x10, 1x7 standpoint.
That, I'm glad you made fun of your so we don't have to get there yet.
I got the
showing
worst
up at
PR ever, right?
No, because Steve still kicks himself in the butt for not breaking 19. So,
but his 2K isn't 6.0.0.0.0.0. So.
Again, I wasn't going to make fun of your, because we're talking about moving boats, and all the boat movers out there are going to be happy to know that we're not picking on anybody.
People nowadays, we got to come back to people nowadays, right? Like the different culture, the different generations, right? Like I sent in our Fast Friends group chat, like we had a training earlier this week at work about how to talk to Gen Z, right? And they're putting up the slides of that. But that must have felt like, you're there for a couple months, and then you roll in and you go to trials with Pat O'Dunn. And that must have, for some people listening, that's got to feel like it's the equivalent of rowing for 3 days and jumping in the car and going down to Elkhart, like just for the national team. Right, like you did it again, where you're just like, yeah, we're just gonna train a bit, and then we're gonna jump in the pair.
That's a great.
Right?
That's a great. Yeah. What's the difference?
And for some people, they're like, wait, no, it didn't take like 3 years of training before you finally went to trials? You mean you just signed up after a few months of training, and
I wouldn't minimize that year, though, right? So I got there in September, and I mean, we had the fall racing season. I didn't race the Charles that year, but it was the head of the Schuylkill, and then we had a full winter off, a winter in the erg room with the weights. We had a trip to Tampa for about a week. So I mean, I see the metaphor.
I'm not trying to
that you're drawing, but I mean, I like, when I think back on kind of what that year did for me from a physiological standpoint, it was really beneficial. We put in a lot of miles.
You hit that parabolic curve there.
But I don't think you can minimize any of it, because sort of tying a few things together that happen on the show and the conversations that we have, I'm always fascinated with stories like this. I'm fascinated with stories like Bo Hoopman. And anytime that anybody comes on the show who is a high performer like yourself and gets to use the word naive, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's fascinating to me. And then I think the word that a lot of us use in the more traditional rowing upbringing, and give me a second to explain that, but is the word delusional. You have to be a bit delusional. And so what do I mean? So when it comes to my experience, or Dan's experience, or Steve's experience, the national team in one form or another, we were touching that at 17, 18 years old, right? Junior team stuff, right? Shortly after that, it's U23s. Me at Cal and Steve and at Princeton and Northeastern, we're around guys who went to world championships. We're around guys who already went to the Olympics, and we're 18, 19 years old, rowing in the same programs as these guys. And then we arrive in 2001 to Princeton. There's a certain expectation that comes with that for all of us, for the reason why we're there and what we're trying to do, right? And so Dan always uses the word, I think there's a lot of unpacking of the trauma that a lot of us experienced. And a lot of that, I think, is very interesting in the sort of traditional rowing sense. You go to a school that has a lot of athletes who do national team stuff early or Olympic stuff early, and then it's, time for you to enter it.
So, you know, your experience was very different, but it also sounds like you avoided a lot of the pitfalls that we experienced through that environment and those expectations, so that when you did land at Princeton, you landed at exactly the right time. Like that was the time for you to be there, as opposed to the experience that I think a lot of us had, where we were thinking about Princeton when we were like 18 years old and just couldn't wait to get there until we were 21, 22 in 2001, for example, Dan and myself. That did not allow us and afford us what you had and what some of the other guests have had, which is just sort of like, yeah, it was pretty simple. I just had to be really good in the boat and be faster than everybody else. And I was pretty naive about it and this and that. And I'm just like, I'm pulling my hair out over here because there is this huge part of me, you know, as you get older and you have perspective and you look back and I'm like, you mean I could have done this differently? I could have done it. Like what was going on inside my mind, inside my emotional state, like I could have done it differently. And the more conversations we're having like yours, it's really a big aha moment for me where it's like, man, yeah, this could have been different. And so that's why for me in this story, I'm like, yeah, the joy of Princeton and Mercer, right? Because I couldn't imagine that. I couldn't imagine it. Can I imagine the purity and the joy of rowing? Yes, absolutely. But the joke in my head is like, yeah, because Princeton was so much fun. But right, it's all these different experiences. So, you know, I do want to get to that part of your story where you would mention it a couple of times now, but you said, yeah, we'll unpack what the joy of Princeton and Mercer are. And I'm very fascinated, but it's starting to make more sense to me as we're talking about the timing of your story. We're talking about the being naive and all those different things. So it's starting to make a lot more sense now to me in terms of where this is headed.
Can we go on a side quest before we get back there?
I got one.
Okay.
Just, it may tie in together. This is where I think it's interesting, Schnobrich, because Luke just set it up for the different perspectives, and that's what's really fun about this show. And you are the more unique perspective in this, I think, greater context of national team rowing. Coming in with that sense of joy and naivety and wonder, part of the issue of someone like you coming into the established team is that if we lose to a Pen AC boat, we are ripped apart for like the next month, right? We are ripped apart for the next month. And so like the hope was like nobody good was coming out of Pen AC, like a Beery or like, and so when you and Pat like show up on the scene was interesting because I was sculling at the time and it was just like, oh man, whoever lost to the Pen AC boat is getting their ass chewed out right now. So that's like the context is really important of like why I'm like, so like, oh my God, this is blowing my mind. Cause at that same time and space, somebody lost to you from Princeton and their life was hell. Like like usually we ask, who are you the villain in someone's story? That's who you're the villain in someone's story. The guy who you beat in 2005 from the Princeton Training Center.
Yeah.
Steve, go ahead.
Well,
and maybe we'll let the guests talk. We might let the guests talk.
Yeah, maybe. No, I was going to fast forward to Gifu, right? Because like Matt, like if I'm not wrong, right? Like did like so Volp and Bo beat you guys, but then they declined the pair, right?
Yeah,
is that the case?
Well, and in 05, I can't remember. I'm not aware of another year in which in which the pair selection was like 05. So, I rode the NSR 1 in the single, and then I rode the NSR 2 in the pair with Pat. And we led the final until about 250 to go, and Volp and Bo rode through us, and I think they got us by about a half a length. And then after that, Mike had indicated that, so is Gifu, right? It's Japan. The team was relatively small, right? So it would have been Volp and Bo and Beery and Deacon. And then it would have been Inman and Paul Daniels. And then that's the year when like you had the Brett Newland group that came up and rode the Cox 4, right? So they took a small team, right? The straight 4, Beery, Deacon, Bo, Volp doubled up into the 8 with Paul and Josh, and I'm trying to think of who the other two were. Can't remember. There you go. Hi. There you go.
See, like me, right?
Wait, Steve, you were there? Were you there,
Yeah.
Steve?
Yeah.
Who am I
And
missing?
Bloomquist.
Matt Hughes?
Bloomer.
Bloomer was in there. Okay.
Bloomer was
okay.
there.
Matt
Right.
Hughes. Matt Hughes was in the Coxed Four with Newland and
Yeah.
I think this guy
Troy
Pat from
Sullivan,
Northeastern.
Pat Sullivan,
Pat
Troy
Sullivan.
Pat Sullivan,
Pat
and Troy
Sullivan.
Kepper, and Squirrel doubled
yeah.
up.
So like I was gonna skip that because you're right. It was a
Heard
weird
that name
year,
in a long time.
right?
Which one?
Troy Kepper. Haven't heard that name.
Yeah.
Fucking 30 years. Wow.
Dude,
coming in,
world
Justin
national
coming
champion,
in
IRA
like,
champion, and world champion.
Yeah. All
Justin
good.
coming in like Obi-Wan. I haven't heard
Yeah.
that name in a long time.
But
Yeah,
anyway,
keep going.
so-
Keep going.
How great was that
he was
row
gonna-
we had in the 8? In practice row that we had in the 8 when the water was shit and Mike had to try to get the 8 out.
in Gifu. Yeah.
Yeah.
That place was a mess. It was tidal. So it was really,
Yeah.
they threw out all the world best times, but like if you look at the times in Gifu, like the 4 and the quad, they were like 25 seconds faster than the world best time at the time.
No,
there was
it wasn't. It wasn't tidal. It was dammed. It was
Typhoons
dammed,
and
and a
Oh, okay.
typhoon
Okay,
came
all right,
through.
all right,
So
all right.
they opened the
Yeah.
dam because they were worried that the typhoon was going to flood half of Japan.
We're talking fluid mechanics now, Steve.
Yeah.
We're in a safe space. All right. Anyways,
All right.
back,
All right. So,
you know, so after the NSR, so Mike had indicated that he wanted the 4 and to double in the 8, and then he needed pair guys. So he basically told Pat and I, look, go to pair trials. We're not going to send anybody from the camp, and there was no other entries. So Pat O'Donnell and I just rode down the course because we had to finish the line. We didn't have to set the gold standard. We just had to cross over the finish line, and we were the pair. So it was a really unique situation just because of all that stuff at NSR2.
Yeah.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I mean, that's it. There's so much nuance set. There's so much overlap. I think the really cool thing that I love about where this is going to is that really that you and Walt and I is such a tough tie of who I really think would be the better bowman. in a four. And I think part of that is like the pair was such your specialty, right? Like I think that was really obvious is that when you got, especially by leading into 2008, there was no being just good at one thing anymore. I think what you brought into that system, and then just the overlap of guys who had done 2 cycles, the fact that we as a country set that the world record and the standard, and that, rowing at that time in space was the fastest it had ever been, and had broken some big barriers on the men's and women's team. So one of the biggest things we just talk about is the talent that was in Princeton Training Center at that time, from the women's side, the lightweights, etc. So you're really in this come up to the camp after this into the new pressure cooker, right? And this is the deeper, stronger, smarter, we were better trained in a lot of ways, PTC. And it went from just having a big erg wasn't enough, or winning, like you had to be consistent every day, all day, in every boat class, and show up for the workouts, and be able to lift, and be able to be in Chula Vista. And so I think when you came into this pressure cooker, you had such an advantage by being able to row the pair, and I think handle the mileage of the pair. So talk a little bit about like coming into Princeton Training Center and using that skill to navigate your way to the top of what is now, like, sure, Penn AC is one pool, but now you're in Princeton Training Center with the world's best talent.
So after Gifu in fall of 2005, Pat and I rode in the Head of the Charles with Pat Godfrey and Steve Kasperzak, right? So it was kind of a Penn AC Cox 4 that we went and raced, and that was a great time. But then after that, Pat and I both came up to to Princeton for kind of the whole winter training season. And then spring of 2006 was when we did the double header of the 3 or 4 weeks in Chula Vista, and then the 3 weeks up in, sorry, when the heck did we do that trip? I haven't thought about all these things. So we did Chula Vista in that was 2007. In 2006 was the year that we did 3 weeks in Berkeley and 3 weeks up in Washington. So that was kind of and we did a lot of 8s and 4s and some pair work in both of those, but we weren't at home, right? It was like we were traveling, so we kind of used everybody else's equipment. But then that kind of 2000, so Pat and I kind of had gotten split up and we were just going into the mix, right? And in 2006 so that spring was really different. And I think so of all the places that were not joyful, when I was probably like at a low point, it would have been kind of the coming out of NSRs going towards selection in 06. Because we had
So you actually lived in Princeton.
Yeah. Welcome to
so again, the statistics are through line.
Yeah.
Now you're living in Princeton, and the joy
we got there.
of
We got
rowing
there.
is sucked out of there.
I'm knocked down a peg. Yeah. But that was the year when so Giuseppe Lanzone, who I think has been on here too, he and I raced the pair for NSR that year, and he wasn't a citizen yet, right? So he wasn't going to be able to go to Worlds because that hadn't come through. So it was we had good speed and we're moving, but it was just I probably always felt like my spot was on the line and that I was on the outside a little bit looking in, or that I was really trying to fight to get noticed. Because I would say my results were okay, but we did not do the big pair matrix in 06. And so we hadn't kind of gone through and gotten all that granular data, right? I think when you do the pair matrix, you really see a lot of you see a lot of stuff, right? So but that kind of 06 selection process was I didn't have any idea how that was going to turn out, but I wound up winning. So I went from rowing the pair with Juice to rowing with Bloomquist. And then that was the year when kind of Brett and Josh had like won everything in the pair, right? They won all the NSRs that spring. They kind of clobbered everybody. And Mike was going to prioritize the 4. Because that was, I think the commitment that he had made offsite. It's not the Olympic year. It's he was trying to do that, and you knew that Brett and Josh were going to be kind of the backbone of that. But I feel like I got seat raced against everybody in the straight 4 that spring, and it felt like Mike was just like pulling people out of the woodwork to seat race against me, right? And at some point he brought Luke McGee in, right? Luke McGee hadn't been in the camp all year, right? But it's like a week to go, and it was like I'm seat racing Luke, and it was like Mike's like somebody's got to be better than him, right? But I mean, I think that
it feels so special when it's you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It feels so special when it's you.
But I mean, I think I haven't looked at all the old books, but I think the times spoke for themselves, right? And I think Mike wound up kind of having to put me in the boat because of the fact that I kept winning seat races. But I mean, so that was kind of, I did not see that. There was a low point kind of May, June where I was, leaving practice and coming home. And it's like, whenever you're at the camp and you wind up, so there's like 3 or 4 4s will go out to do pieces or whatever. And Mike sends you off in the pair, right? It's kind of like, what that means. All right, well, I'm the guy in the pair with the guy who's not a U.S. citizen today. So I don't know where I'm going to wind up. Right. But I mean, that whole, I don't know whether there was ever a method to that madness. I always trusted that there was something, right? That the times had to tell a story and had to speak for themselves. But I feel like I heard enough stories from you guys where that didn't always happen. But so that would have been probably the most doubt that I had ever had about kind of where I was. But anyways.
Dude,
that was the year that we beat. That was the year that I beat Hamish Bond and Eric Murray. So
Yeah.
that's where it ended.
Yeah.
I two of the fastest sweep rowers ever. But
You found the
Yeah.
center of the lane.
yeah. No, I thought, locked into Brett and Josh and tried to keep the boat stable and just get us across the line. But
Wasn't
was
that,
a- I mean,
wasn't
you guys
that
were
the
a
Bloomer
fat, but
call?
you guys,
He got
you
so
guys were a fast
frustrated.
four.
Bloomer got so frustrated that you guys were knocking buoys that the call was finding the center of the lane.
I mean,
I was in the boat. I probably heard the call. I like had flushed that out of my brain. Right.
I
It was all
remember
joy.
you guys laughing
and
so
happiness and
much.
joy and
that's a lot of intellectual horsepower in there, right? Brett, he's a computer science engineer. Josh, who's an engineer. You, who's an environmental engineer, and Bloomquist, who thinks he's good at everything because he went to Harvard. Like,
Yep.
So, and Exeter and Oxford. So he knows everything.
Yeah.
So I think like that four was really amazing to watch because you're short. You're like tiny in that boat, with Josh and Brett's size. So I want to just stick to you talking about how that was at your low point in that moment, like being with Juice. One, it makes me happy that your low point is being with Juice. It's going to be fun to rub in. It's going to be fun to rub in on him.
I'll clarify.
Schnobrich's worst days was you, Juice.
Juice needs context for this. Yeah. All right.
So, but two is what in that moment, obviously it shifted because you get into this four, it's a fast four. Yes, you beat, and I think Mahi was out of that point, but you guys got fourth, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Like you got fourth at Worlds.
You first dead heated.
Yeah, you did. You had it like I'll get to that, but I'm just trying to say the context of the speed is like when we talk about where Schnobrich was at his lowest and where he's now fourth in the world in the most competitive event in terms of its depth, especially back then there would be like 24 fours. So just what kind of changed? Like when you were in that moment, like what was the thing that kept you resilient to just say, no, I'm going to just keep showing up? And then when did that resiliency turn into changing your momentum?
The just for context, for Juice's purpose, he picked me up in those moments, so that was a fun little pair to spin around in, and that leveled me, right? But no, regardless of the uncertainty or where you think you stand, you are going to finish the process, right? We all do that, right? You're committing. We know where the finish line is. We know when selection happens. We know what needs to be done, and I am going to get there and I'm going to see it through, right? The last thing that any of us were going to do would be to walk away, right? Which is why, Luke, you got to San Diego and drove back to Boston, right? So I mean, I feel like that's just kind of inherent in all of us at that in that stage. So you show back up and you take every shot that you're given, right? And leave it on the water, and that's going to decide what the ultimate outcome is. And I think that's what we have, right? That's what you can control. So it's what you bring with you getting into the boat, where you are mentally to kind of center yourself, it's constant adjustment, right? And I feel like, Luke, you're a bow guy, right? I sat bow in almost every boat I ever rode it, right? You jump in the boat and you are following and you are matching and you are making people comfortable. And that's, so, I mean, there's a lot to put your mind to as you do that. And I think, I don't know, you focus in on that and you make it go and you hope for the best. But I actually rewatched that race about a year ago, and I hadn't watched it in 15 years, and I didn't realize, like, so in the final we were in second and the Brits had us by about a deck, and that in that last 500, like the French came through us and the Dutch came through us and the Brits walked away and the Eaton water was nasty, but
we had the dead heat, right? So it's a 4th place finish, but I watched that and I was like, it's the 1500 and I'm a deck down, right? And I just don't remember the final being kind of playing out like that. But that dead heat was the day before we raced double 2Ks, right? We turned around we finished the semis. We tied the Kiwis for 3rd place to the 1,000th of a second, and they made us pull the boats off the water, and we re-raced it about 45 minutes later. We raced back to the starting line, and we went 1v1, and those Kiwis had an outstanding sprint, right? I mean, Bond and Murray, those guys, if you watch those guys in the last 500 in the pair, they have about 8 levels of gears above what other people have. And they had done it in the semi to tie us. And then they didn't have it a second time. So that's, I think we got the best of them on that day. But that took us, we just didn't have the wheels in the last 500 of the final.
Yeah.
We might have otherwise.
And that was world rowing. The fault was that course, right? Because the British hadn't completed the course, so they weren't able to allow a lane 7, right? Because the course wasn't finished, or there was something where they were like, we can't just put them both in, like, because there wasn't any room. Like I remember that argument. Like I remember sitting on the sideline, and
that's true.
we're all like, "That's fucking bullshit," right?
Well, there was that similar to our race. After our race, because the results were so skewed by the crosswind, and they could no longer admit that the crosswind didn't affect results, that they started reseeding. FISA started reseeding world championships based off of the crosswind condition after Ian, because it was so unfair.
That place was a mess. It was
World Rowing learned a lot. World Rowing learned a lot there.
Well, quick segue, because it does lead into just kind of where we are today in the present day. Very intrigued about this whole scent of you being a late bloomer, and how you grew 6 inches and you got bigger, and rowing is this really amazing sport where even if you row as a junior in high school, like, you have to have a certain amount of mitochondria, blood cells, all these things that really doesn't manifest to its density until you're 26, 27, right? That's the average age of an Olympic medalist. So I'm going with the biology of this is, you don't know if someone's going to be a world-class oarsman until they're of this age, or you just have to have the time in your body. You're in this, and you're on the smaller side. I think that's really important to say, like, in that context, you are on the smaller side body weight, 200 pounds on a soaking wet day, I would say, back then.
207. I think I was 207 in the Olympics, and I needed a sandwich. Photos of me.
Right. So like, you
gone.
you have a super fast metabolism. What I'm getting at. So I'm teasing you. So you're able to. Bond and Murray are not small guys, density wise. They're both pretty thick, or at least they got to that standpoint. So I think it's really important to show the context of, like, both the dynamics of sprinting, being able to hold it off, the physiology that you were able to hold in that moment, that you were in the the bow seat. Like, I just would like to unpack a little bit of, like, you're now at this pinnacle level, going toe to toe with the world's best. So a little bit just about the mind shift that you were able to take to make that jump, again, from, like, that's a really big jump mentally, to be able to say, I can hang with the world's best. I'm just really intrigued about that. Was it the physiology that made you feel that way first? Was it the ability to be on that team and contribute to the boat? Or was it still just the, like, naivety of, like, let me just see what I can do?
I had seen the results on the water, right? So, I mean, when I got selected for the 06 boat, right, I knew that that the boat was faster with me in it, right? So, I mean, that's the nice thing about selection, is that you go through that, and now everybody knows that this is how it turned out, and this is like we've got the numbers, right? It validates kind of where you fall. I felt that the 06 crew was totally different than my 05 experience, right? But I mean, Mike Blomqvist had been like you said, he won the IRAs, he rode at Oxford, he rode the boat race. He'd kind of seen all of it, right? Josh and Brett, though, I think were probably in a similar spot as me, where they were, fresh onto the national team the year before. So it was kind of it seemed like we all kind of had nothing to lose, right? And just go out and race hard. Brett and Josh, I knew had moved the pair all year, right? They won every single NSR in that pair and probably most of the pieces in camp in spring of 06. So, I mean, now you're just on the back end of those guys in the boat stable and let them work, right? And be additive. So, I mean, that was definitely, there's a confidence that comes from the group in that type of situation, right? I never thought that I was going to move that boat down the course, but I knew that it was my job to make sure that Brett and Josh could do anything in their power, right? And had a perfect platform to do it. So there's something that comes, from a confidence standpoint that comes with that type of an experience, right? Where now that was the first time I'd gone through a camp selection process, right? The 05 pair was totally different. So this is now I've gone through the process. I've seen how the metrics work, how the seat racing works. I've seen it from a big boat standpoint, and then that pivoted things for kind of what happened in 07, right? Because I mean, 07 was we did a lot of pairs in 07. We went to San Diego. We did a 4-week pair matrix in San Diego. I mean, we rode the pair a lot. But I mean, then that year had gone really well, right? Just because we spent a lot of time in the pairs, and I tended to do well in that boat. So,
yeah, you and Bo win the NSRs?
Yeah, the fall NSR I rode with Matt Deacon, Lake Sagatagan stake turn. Okay, if it hadn't been for all those figure eights on Lake Sag, I think we won by like 1 second or 2 seconds over all that, but we had a damn good stake turn. But yeah, then that spring was all with Bo, and I mean I probably. I don't know. You can correct me if you guys beat us at some point, but I don't remember ever losing in a single piece that spring. And I felt like through I don't know how many miles we rode, but I would imagine that Bo and I rode about 1,000 miles that spring, and I bet we could like write a 100-word abstract with the amount of words that we actually spoke to each other about. It was just like
dude, you two were on and off the water.
You could watch Bo's episode.
Justin, go.
I'll plug for another episode. Watch Bo's episode. He'll talk more than you've ever seen him talk.
Yeah. But I mean, I think this is what this is why your story is full of such joy, because you did back it up the whole way, right? It's like the story sounds so whimsical and fun, and that it just seems like there's fairies leading you along the way a little bit, where even when your lowest moment, you have Juice, who just again, watch Juice's episode. It's really hard to have a bad day with Juice. It's really hard to have a bad. And you now made it to where you're rowing with, a gold medalist 7-seat from the men's Olympic 8, stroked the men's 8 to a gold just 2 years earlier. So Bo really is the guy right now. And you make that pair with him through what was, I would think, a pretty fair and grueling pair matrix in Chula Vista. Like Chula's always full of hard training. So you get stronger, you get fitter, everyone's getting faster.
Yep.
I would say, yeah, you probably won a majority of the pieces. I would be really remiss to say you won them all, knowing that Steve and Sam Burns could not be beat at 14, 20, 14 2Ks.
Yeah.
Right? Now they went the same speed when they went, 28, 32, 28. They were the same. But
I wasn't there until the summer. I wasn't there until the summer of 2006.
But yeah, I do know you beat Wyatt and I at the NSRs because, again, being so in those NSRs, being second so many times. Yeah, you and Bo beat us. And then we got to go in that really epic 4, though.
I know.
In 07. So that's a really highlight. That's a really highlight of my rowing career. is in that 4 where we just put the top 2 pairs together. And we had that nationals in 07 that really reminded me the closest to what you described nationals used to being, where the whole country came together, all the clubs. It was on Mercer. We had some international teams come, and it felt like a real true rowing festival of speed. And like, just to give context to the fans that may be into the nerdy speed side of rowing, on Lake Mercer, we had 2 8s that went 5:20 and 5:21. Right. So like just a second off of the world record speed at that time, which was set by some of those people in that race. So I think the quality of rowing and the absolute pinnacle of rowing speed that was happening in that moment. And yeah, that 4 that we were in was just so lightning fast, even beyond those 8s. It's like, that's like the God, I wish we would have got to race that once internationally to see what we could do.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
No, well, you can't have all of your stroke seats all in the same boat, right?
Yeah, that was the excuse. Can't have all your strokes in one boat. So
that's during the qualification year, right? But yeah.
Yeah, so getting cut from that 4 to stroke the 8, you guys just never went as fast.
Oh yeah, you just slip that in there, huh? Yep. Oh man, and that was I don't know if I want to relive that 07
That wasn't
world.
I'm saying that because that wasn't your fault, right? What I'm getting to is the weirdness of that era. We're trying to win 2 events because the USOC had said to Mike, you need to win 2 events or you lose your job, essentially. So there's pressure to medal in both boats. So I think it's really important to see, again, the context of like the pressure cooker that this Princeton Training Center was. So now we had expectation, right? We weren't underdogs, and we were struggling making these 2 boats. And I think that just in hindsight, if I were to go back in time and run the program that way, you just don't disrupt the fastest boat. So I think that's interesting. I think the 8 does better as well because of that mixing up. So from the coaching standpoint, as the athlete, that is a very frustrating summer. So if you don't want to live through it, don't, because the next year is pretty awesome.
No,
so I think it's important just gloss over, but
yeah, no. Well, the 2007 year was so I mean, there's probably a couple things to touch on because it was, how many times have you done the heats in a world championship in one rig and then completely flipped your stroke seats and your bow seats and flipped everybody all around? That was my first time going through a qualification year, right? I mean, I think a lot of, it seems like, in my mind anyways, or from my standpoint, when I think back on that, it was the stress was making sure that we qualified the boats, right? Yeah. So we didn't have to go back and qualify the next year. So then that 4 was a fun one to row, and we got about a week in it, right? But then all of that kind of shifted as it pivoted, and we started the world. Did Bo talk about this on his show? Did he go into any of this?
Yeah, I think Brian did too. So
okay,
and so did Juice.
All right. Well, then so do you need me to complete the collection, or have we heard enough of it already?
You just need to say that it's just from your perspective, because you're actually completing the boat. I think you're the first complete lineup of a story. So
ooh,
it was frustrating, right? If the through line is, it was very frustrating for you guys because you didn't feel like you had a fair chance to overcome, like you were getting switched around all the time, which is not normal. It's an anxiety move. It's a panic move. It's showing no confidence by the coaches. It wasn't good coaching. And so like you guys were plenty talented. And that's one of the things that we're looking at, is just seeing where it could have improved. And I appreciate you getting to this where you're showing your frustration, but trying to be really delicate with the people involved. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, and having seen the result and where we got, it got us what we needed, right? But I mean, in hindsight, like that was probably 07. Probably I felt the strongest, and I felt the fittest that I did over the course of my career, and the pair results all came through, right? So I mean, I kind of felt like that was, of all the years, that was probably my best year, right? Just from a number standpoint. or kind of a finish standpoint. But then the World Championships was a disappointment, right? So I mean, it was I've probably let sleeping dogs lie and water under the bridge. But I mean, I felt so. the four is lightning in a bottle, right? You like the sum of the whole is not the same as the individual parts. Right. Like a four, you can get four guys who on paper should not move the four the fastest, and they're going to be 5 seconds faster than everybody. Right. That's just, it can happen that way. It's got a lot of capacity for speed change. Right. So you can drop, 2 seconds, 3 seconds for a 500 meter towards the finish. And it's dynamic. And I mean, I like between Volp and Juice and Bo, like I'd take those guys in a boat any day of the week, right? But like I felt like we were trusted to kind of it was like we were trusted to figure it out, right? We were coached, but it was, at the end of the day, Volp and Bo had both been through Athens. They, all the stories about kind of what happened in the 2 months prior to Athens with the 8 kind of figuring it out and finding extra speed, right? I think it was kind of, that was the expectation that all of a sudden it was going to crystallize and it was going to be there. And I think we were quick, but it just never hit that. We never had kind of lightning in the bottle, right? And that's what you need to be competitive, right? Like those fours. I thought about this moment last night, and I had to look up the times in those races to see where things shook out. And in our semi, so in the final that year, from first to sixth, I think it was 3 seconds separated the top 6, and then the 3 boats in the B final with us, we were like the next second, and we got fourth in the semi, and we were, nipped by I think the French at the line, and it was super disappointing. But then we finished 7th or second in the B final, and we qualified, and then we went to the house and drank about a gallon and a half of German beer. So
yeah, but that and I think that's where it's like where I'm being harsh on the coaching, right? Is that it's trying to figure that out. Like, I don't know if I would make different decisions, but really what I want to see from your perspective to finish the lineup and the perspective is how challenging the straight 4 is in that time and space to Justin, like how difficult the 4 was because of its depth, how tight that race of death was, right? It's called the race of death, the B final of the straight 4. And it's just, again, the context of how, because to me, it's just intriguing how you're expanding to this pressure. It's a disappointing result, but we got to wind it right back up for the Olympic year. And it's just so awesome to see, because I would never, I'm trying to highlight you as your archetype is like always ready to go, right? Get in the boat with Schnobrich and he's always ready to go. So as we move into 08, how did you turn yourself around from that 07 straight 4 performance to say, I got to make this Olympic team now. I'm good enough.
I'm trying to think of where my head was at fall of 08 or fall of 07. I'm trying to, what races did we race in that fall? We did the Charles. We won the Charles. That was the second year that we won the Charles.
That's the one Steve forgot about.
And I didn't mean to, I had to kind of like place myself in time to kind of think about what that, so the fall of the Olympic year didn't feel like the Olympic year yet, right? It didn't feel like the pressure was there. And that started when we got to Clemson, right? We came back, we did the Hansa Cup. That wasn't the year that we won the Hansa Cup in 06, right? And I think we got second in fall of 07. Yeah. But then we won the Charles again, and kind of all of that was, it's kind of, that's, I don't know. Those are kind of a couple enjoyable months. You're going on trips. We're racing in races that, we're going to do well. They're going to be fun to win. It's kind of going to the Charles when you're on the so I've been to the Charles now the last kind of 4 years, rowing in Masters 8s, right? Just to do reunion stuff and see it again. And it's thinking back on kind of when you were, when you're on the national team and you're in the Champ 8 and you're rowing in the boat that should win, right? I like that was pretty fun, right? And I think, so it's
when you kind of think back on that, it's like those were lighter periods in the year, right? And then I think we got to Clemson, and that's when things shifted, and you got new people into camp now, and there's it was kind of a really different feel. But I don't know, I probably enjoyed that fall a lot, but
Yeah, for perspective from 04, and I think from your perspective too, Luke, from the outside of the observer on that, and then Steve and Schnobrich, 08. Clemson was an interesting experiment for sure, and I think socially the ramp into Olympic selection was much easier because there was more social. Like we in 04 when we just went to Chula, like it was right at, like, especially back then at Chula, it felt like a minimum security facility because it was like we did nothing outside of train, really, except for maybe 1 or 2 weekends throughout the 3 months. Whereas in like Clemson, there was a little bit more freedom to socialize on the weekends. So I think from your standpoint, you're right. The intensity ramped up in Clemson a little bit more, whereas in 04, it was like right from jump, it was time to go. Yeah. So talk about Clemson from your experience, because I don't think we really talked about that training camp.
We did some serious miles in Clemson. I think I felt like we rode a lot of long rows. But I mean, that camp we did a short parametrics there, but it seemed like it was just 4 matrices for about 3 straight months. And then we'd pop them in the 8s and we'd go out for, I don't know how long, 2 hours, 2.5 hours in the 8s, just kind of getting waked down by pleasure craft and fishing boats and, guys that weren't grinding it out and they were drinking beers. But
few of those rows. Do you remember seeing Matt Imes like shake the gas tank and tap Mike on the shoulder?
Yeah.
And then it's
yeah.
Okay, 10 more, let's spin.
Yep. Steve and we probably spent a lot of time in a 4
that was fun.
in Clemson. I remember being in a lot of mixes, like you and Josh and myself, and who would have the other port been that sat between the two of us?
Deacon was in there a lot.
Yeah.
I don't think Bo was in there
neither of you went to San Diego, right?
No,
we didn't. No, so that was just that group, and I mean, I wasn't there, but I mean, from what I heard, that was hard for them because there was like 4 of them, right, or 6 of them that were out there, kind of all by themselves.
It rotated in different, because I went out there after Thanksgiving or after Christmas. I think to keep the show moving, because Justin, I can see Justin be like, this is too much in the weeds. So I appreciate the fact that he keeps me and us from getting too much into the jargon.
There you
go. Because the context of the two, and this is your story, not ours, but you're right about the mileage. I think the weightlifting we were doing was really intense. The training, like we were doing, and I think the physicality of like you doing almost 30 reps of pull-ups in a row, like the weights we were doing were much more intense. I think getting through Clemson was a really unique crucible because it wasn't very clear yet who was the top group, because the talent was really deep and it didn't make a lot of clarity. And so I remember coming out of Clemson and going to Princeton thinking like, there are literally 2 8s worth of guys that could be in this 8. And it was getting clearer and clearer that we weren't going to prioritize a 4. We were going to prioritize an 8, because the 8 speeds just kept getting faster and faster and faster. So as we came into that spring, what was that like for you, knowing that these NSRs were now so much different that a bad result could be exponentially take you out of the whole mix altogether?
Yeah.
Because it's the Olympic year and there's new talent. So you got to be absolutely on. So talk a little bit about that spring. Because Clemson, I think, is a mess.
Yeah. Well, and it was so, so when we go out with 2, so I was the bow guy, right? I was the bow guy in the 4 before it got swapped in 07. I was the bow guy in 06. I was the bow guy in the pair in 05, right? So I mean, I kind of always saw that as being
I wanted to be the bow of the eight, right? Was probably where I wanted to sit, and if I had a choice, and then I was when we'd take 2/8 out, it was always me and Paul Tatey sitting bow, right? So I would like I probably had in my head that it was like, well, this is Mike's brother and he's rowing bow, and I got to make sure that I perform right, and that I don't give anybody any excuse so that I lose that seat. And Paul's great, and I've probably never talked to Paul about this, and but I mean, I think in the back of my mind, I probably
and Paul
had that.
looked at you the same way.
Yeah. Yep. But the that was the end of Clemson was kind of an odd. So we had started rowing pairs at the end of Clemson, and I was rowing with Josh, and we were fast. And Josh and I had never really rowed the pair in a consistent way, but I like. So Mike had never put kind of Bo and I back together. He'd kind of split us up. And so I was rowing with Josh, and it was just like I remember being kind of first, second, or third in most of the pieces, regardless of length. And so we rode that boat for about 3 or 4 weeks, and then at some point right before we went back home, it's the NSR is a month out. Josh and I got swapped out, and Mike put me back with Bo, which I think he thought was going to be great because we had done as well as we had the previous spring, but kind of, you change as rowers, right? Your impulse, kind of how we're sitting in boats, how we're moving, length and all of that stuff changes. And the boat, when Bo and I rode it in spring of 2008, it didn't have the same feel that we had in 2007. And we kind of couldn't figure it out. We like couldn't get back to it. So we were competitive, but we were getting beat, right? So we go through the NSR process, and so the semis it was like a miserable Mercer day, right? 18-inch swells and 20-mile-an-hour gusts, and it's like almost hardly rowable. But we rode the semis, and I think Bo and I got 4th or 5th and the AB semi, and got pushed into the B final. And that was I'd never been through the process before, but I knew that guys that made the B final at the NSRs in 2004, like that was the end almost, right? Or you're now on the outside looking in. So I was pretty, I was pretty shook up over that, or kind of, certainly felt the pressure, and felt like things were kind of had slipped away a little bit, but then it was like the 2006 cycle again, right? So Steve, you and I, we went into kind of 4 selection, right? And we had 4 4s at the same time. And I think it was often like you and me and Micah and Josh were in a 4. I feel like we saw that lineup a lot, and there were some times where he swapped us around, but I felt like that boat was kind of going to be a chunk of the 8, right? It felt like it was like, well, I'm going to keep these 4 guys together because here's the length and here's the bow end, and it's going to be the same rhythm. And I could kind of see that taking shape a little bit, but you never know, because then at some point we get split up, and now we're doing pair racing against each other. Remember this? With like,
yeah. And it was like, it was basically like we got back, and it seems like now that the way you're telling it, and I'm remembering it now, it seems like we just got to the very end, and Mike was like, oh shit, we got to like actually send these guys out in the pair and let's figure it out. And he was like just doing it at last minute. Like, we've done all this selection, I'm ready, but I got to do this legal thing of send you down in the pair. And I haven't spent any time figuring out what the pairs are.
Yeah.
And then he did the Mike thing where he's like, and he's just like holding his hair, and he's like, these guys, now I got to invite everyone to camp, and I got to do it all over again. And
yep. Yeah, you messed up the plan.
We all messed it. Yeah.
I'm not saying you're alone in this group of people that know the pain of messing up Mike Taty's plan.
Yeah.
Right. So you're in good company. It's just your turn to feel that emotion.
Yeah.
You're not alone. You're in that emotion.
Yeah.
And I think it's really interesting because seeing it from your side, again, very different. And it's fun that we wind up in the same boat. Is your four that you just mentioned, Josh, Steve, you, and Micah, like I could not remember. I had no recollection of you guys being in that four at all. And so I remember getting to the point where we just had 2 8s that were breaking 4 minutes for 1500s just over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And you basically like just knowing that I was on the other side of most of those wins and just feeling the 8 start to make its way. And to what Steve, I think, is saying in a way that there was still this pair trial. And I think that's what's really unique is because like, if you think of the intersection of these stories, you had to go to pair trials. Steve and Micah was told to go to pair trials too. Steve knew that I went to pair trials in 04 and I was trying to be a good soldier because Mike told me to, that I was going to be in the boat no matter what. Got beat by Luke by less than 2 seconds over 3 races and then got booted out of the 4 quickly after that. So Steve was like, Micah, we're not rowing in pair trials. And you and Josh just had to go by yourselves and like then win it by what, 12 seconds over the Winklevoss?
I don't think it was that much, but we had a quick pair. I had always thought that we had speed in Clemson and would have been comfortable kind of staying with that through the spring because it always got better. For those of you who have you rowed with Josh, Dan?
In a pair?
No, you're on the same side. I'm an idiot. Steve
no,
did, though.
I rode starboard though. So
yeah, and everybody's got a different rhythm, right? And Josh has got a unique impulse, and I felt like we could find I could always find the speed with him. It was kind of a different stroke or kind of a different swing to it. What do we lose, Steve?
Yeah, Dougie.
He'll
come back. He'll come back. But yeah, so I think that to me is what's really intriguing is that you went into that pair trial and it was like, I remember talking to Josh about it, like, you guys have to win this because we need you in the 8. Right. I think it was really clear that we needed you guys in the 8. And, Wyatt and I had talked about this as he's like, should we row this pair trial? I was like, no, like, we're not doing it. Like, that's a trap. It's a trap. And you guys fell for the trap, but I just remember we all watched it, like needing you guys to win so we can make sure the 8 stayed together.
Yeah.
And dude, man, I just remember you guys winning by so much and being like, damn, these guys are fast. And thank God they're in the 8.
Yeah.
So it was just really relieving for, I think, us in that boat to have you make sure your talent. And then you just had this really amazing leverage. I think that's the other thing is you had this amazing leverage you had to decide, you had the right to double up at the Olympics and you chose not to. And that's really cool. Not many athletes have that option.
I felt like, and from my standpoint, I felt like I didn't have a choice, right? We had those, I mean, those 2 8s side by side were ridiculously fast. And I thought that the 4 that came together was the fastest one. But it was, I kind of felt like out of those 16 guys, there was not a lot of separation at the end of the day, right? So, I mean, it seemed, so Josh and I had so Josh rode with you at the NSR, right, Steve?
Yep.
And I was both of us were in the B final. So I felt like both of us were kind of on the outside of that Final 4 selection looking in, and we were, we're off with Tim just doing pieces or whatever. But I think, so I felt like I had to do the pair to prove it. And that allowed me to retain a little bit of control, right? That if I focused on like I knew the boat was fast, I knew who we were likely going to race, and I felt comfortable that we could probably take them. So I mean, when you feel confident in the boat and it's really your only shot to get control, you kind of go with it. But I mean, having been through the pair in 05, I would have never wanted to row the pair at the Olympics. Having just jumped in a boat a month or 2 in advance, right? The pair is like the 4, where I mean, you can drop 3-4 seconds off a split in a 500 meter period, and you got to know where the world's at, right? Like you got to race against the other guys from an international standpoint in the pair to really know what they're capable of. Where I feel like in 05 we went and we were in the pair, and I've never raced internationally, right? We're going to see how we do and hope for the best, right? But I like by that point in time, you really know that it's kind of like, well, if I'm looking for the best possible outcome, choosing to do the pair 6 weeks in advance or 8 weeks in advance is not going to be it, because you're just not prepared, right? You want to set the pair and then go to the World Cup events, right? And feel the world out and see where you are and get better and make improvements. And I just, the 8 was the choice, and it was pretty obvious.
Well, so I'm glad you made that choice.
Thank you.
Taking that, yeah, talk a little bit, if you can, not so much the whole selection process, because we've had a lot of people talk through that particular 08 selection process, which seemed to be pretty intense, but more so like once you've been selected to the 8, or you knew that like you were going to be in the 8, like for sure, because you mentioned it earlier in the episode where you were just like, I didn't know till I knew, till I was in the boat, like yeah, talk about that, right? Because I'm like Luke mentioned, what I'm taking most away from this episode, I'll be honest, in your recounting of kind of your journey, is the starting point to the 08 making of the boat, and just really that arc, which is incredible. It's a really kind of, again, just I was like all of us, like on as hosts, like we were all high school rowers, we were all competitive collegiate rowers, like we did time in the national team, but like what just what is that like, right? Just as like a reflection, if you can even recall, where you're just like, dude, I have the real deal stars and stripes on my chest now, right? Like that's a pretty incredible feat. Only 9 people every 4 years get in that boat. So yeah, I would love to hear kind of how that kind of panned out for you.
As you were framing that, like I could still feel the like tension in my shoulders dissipating when we crossed the line in that pair final. Like it was a physical. It is that there's like a physical relief to it, right? Where it is. I mean, it's especially as for the first time, right?
Sure.
It's an absolute incredible honor, and the longer that we stayed in, sorry, I'm stumbling with
That's
the words, but what I would say is that so I went from being naive, right, and nothing to lose, right, but by the time that you get to final selection Olympic year, right, you are in the tunnel, and there is nothing else that you see. It is what you think about. It is what you brood about. It is what everything is focused on, right, and that tunnel just collapses on you as you get closer and closer over the 4-year cycle. And I think so that when we won the pair trial was kind of when that opened up again, and you call your folks and you talk to them for the first time, and you kind of can't imagine the words that are coming out of your mouth, right? That's what it felt like for me. And then we decided 5 minutes later to jump into the 8 selection again, right?
But you were the first one to make the team from the group.
Yep.
Right. And so you jump in the Olympic selection already having been named to the team. Like you were going, and you were like, okay, who else is going to be in the boat?
Yep. No, and I mean, that is the probably unfortunate thing about the end of the selection in the Olympic year is kind of how these things shake out, right? There are guys that just didn't make the 8 that could have made the 8, right? But they, based on how the game kind of gets played, or how we're coached into making decisions or whatever, right? We elected the pair path and others didn't, and now we're jumping back into camp having made it. But I mean, I get how it's like, if I was in the camp, or if I was in the 8 selection and somebody had just gone and won the pair trials and now is coming back and wants to be in the 8, I could, on the other side of that, I'd probably be thinking like, well, this asshole, they already got their spot and I've only got one chance. And it's like, I get that, fully understand. But we all kind of need to make the decisions that we do, right? Based on how the cards get played. And that was how our, I like being able to tell people that I let the Winklevoss twins go to the Olympics, right?
So that's actually, I think that's
Yeah.
actually, that's great and perfect segue. Often in the show, online and offline, we talk about sort of the variations, right? And when we talk about the Olympics, we talk about the difference between a gold medalist, a medalist, a participant. And so we're kind of, I think maybe what we haven't touched on is those who make it and those who don't, because we all rode with a bunch of people that as we look back, we think, maybe when we started a 4-year campaign, we're like, oh, they're definitely going. That guy's going. He's going to the Olympics. He's a shoo-in. And it doesn't happen.
Yep.
And then somebody that you don't consider is going to make it, makes it, right? And so for us, a lot of times it comes back to this concept of edge. And it's different for everybody. It's different, and so I'm really curious talking about this, and it was very tongue-in-cheek what you said, but also true. I let the Winklevoss go to the Olympics because I won the pair and secured that spot, and then I jumped right back into the 8s, into making the 8. So what carried you to that point? What is the edge? Dan talks about you being a smaller guy in terms of weight. We can talk about the idea that you did it differently than a lot of us did it, or sort of the traditional path. But what do you personally feel is your edge that you carried with you, or you refined, or you developed, that when you did get on the phone and you were calling your parents and saying, hey, I just won the pair trials and I'm going to the Olympics? What was the edge that carried you there? What about your rowing, your attitude, your personality? What carried you to that spot to be able to make that phone call, to be able to be in the position to decide to do the pair or jump in the 8? What got you there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that this goes back to the beginning, right? It's like I had always been, I grew up watching the Olympics. I grew up, in a family that every time winter or summer games came on, we watched it start to finish. We watched everything. We kind of followed the athletes. And there is, I mean, there is nothing like the Olympics from a black and white win and lose standpoint, right? The thrill of victory and agony of defeat are palpable. It's not the same thing in the NBA finals and the World Cup and those are glorious and amazing, right? But it's, we're not making 50 million a year, right? This is something that we're doing for kind of the real belief and kind of the pursuit of excellence. And so that was it. It was the kind of the pillar, I guess, that I kind of held the Olympic movement and the Olympic Games up to, just in terms of what it meant and kind of, how it's revered. We all go through processing, right? And Steve and I and Dan all sat together, and I'm not sure if you guys remember this, but I mean, you go through you get all the gear and that's fun, but then you go through kind of the 4 hours of seminars where they're talking about press interactions and what it means, and they're kind of instilling in you what's expected as Americans when you're in front of cameras and how we carry ourselves, right? And the woman, and I don't remember her name, but she said that, there's going to be millions of people that are going to watch you on television, and when they look at when they look for you, they're not looking for the name on the back, they're looking for the flag on the front, right? And that's what it's all about. It's where there were 675 U.S. athletes, I think, in Beijing, people remember Michael Phelps, right? So there's 674 other ones out there that, and that's LeBron and Chris Bosh and Dwight Howard. And I get there's NBA guys in that mix too, but most of them are guys that are, are people that came from our beginnings and drove through the process and kind of made it that far. So that's what it's about, is about representing and being able to get there and do it and have a good day, right? I like, it's not a best of 7 series. It's you get one shot, and I, we raced those Canadians 10 times, and I'd say that we beat them 4 out of 10 maybe, but it just didn't happen on that day. But anyways, that was kind of what was under it, right? Is kind of, where are you from? Who are you doing this for? Why do you believe in this? And what does this mean? Right. And it was always something that was revered growing up. And something that I always really honored, and, and then you're in the tunnel and there's no turning back. So,
that the patriotism is really, it's really inspiring, Schnobrich. Right. Just with everything that's going on, in this time capsule that we're creating, it feels really good just to hear someone like you just talk about even those names. Like, everybody knows Michael Phelps. I remember you.
You bet.
Yep.
Yeah.
And here you're a household name. And I think that's the one thing that's just really important for me about this show is there is nothing separating you from them. In fact, that comeback we had from 6th to 3rd is amazing. You drove that, sitting in that bow. You and Bo.
Statler and Waller.
Just really keeping the energy going. And so I think I love the fact that your story of perseverance and naivety and just the willingness to continue to see the pursuit of excellence. You said that lots of different times. So I want to thank you for this. And we've come to this show knowing that this was going to be rich of history. So going to hit you with the last question.
All right.
And that question is, if you can go anywhere in time, forwards or backwards, and coach yourself, when would it be, and what would you say?
Holy moly. I'm going to answer this in a slightly different way, because this is something. So I didn't know if we were going to get. Most of us are fathers, I think, right? So I didn't know if we're going to get into fatherhood, right?
We all are.
So. Yeah, because I asked ask him. We've got a chance to do it, right? We've all got little versions of ourselves, and if you could go back in time, how would you do it differently? What would you do? I just recanted what my background was, right? And I've got a wife who, was a competitive rower. We've already had her father on, right? They've got legacy in the family, and we've got, how many rowing coaches do I know at college universities, right? It's like, I got 3 sons that if I plug them into rowing in high school and I teach them a thing or two and take them out in a double, I'm sure I could find a way that they could, I know how to, I'm not a Major League Baseball player, right? Who's out there with my 3-year-old teaching him how to hit both ways as soon as he can, as soon as he can talk. So we're rowers, right? So okay, we can be strategic in how we align them and pivot them towards kind of a future. But you heard my story. It's like you couldn't coach my story, right? It's mine was just, be open-minded and look for adventure and enjoy yourself and apply yourself to new things and appreciate that, right? I like, alternative sports and not feeling, for a kid from the Midwest where people don't know anything about rowing, or not as much, right? It's not a high school sport. So it's like, you're doing what? You're going to be on that team? Is that crew thing? Is that the racing canoe? Or, so I don't know how it's a tough question, because I feel like a lot of my story was dumb luck and kind of one foot in front of the other. And if I had gotten into rowing earlier so I could get a head start, I'm not sure if I would have gone through the same process, right? Or whether I would have had the same perspective. So it's coming back to being a dad, right? It's like, well, I can set them up. I know college rowing coaches that I'm sure would take them if I could get their ERG score somewhere, but that's not their story. That's mine. And at the end of the day, you I don't know, what are we, right? We appreciate people. We care about people. Give your time, get connected. And then you sit here 20 years later, talking to a bunch of good friends. Right. So, I mean, it's I don't know. It's kind of a non-answer. I'm not going to coach myself. But I mean, at the same time, it's like, life is an adventure and enjoy it. But all of those.
I thought you were going to say box of chocolates.
No.
Snobes.
Well said.
I actually really appreciate that perspective. Having 3 sons, having that legacy. Again, mentioning like Peter Raymond's one of our episodes, silver medalist in the 8. Like you're bronze medalist in the 8. Mom's a national champion, U23 champion, and I think the fact that you have so much perspective is really important for any of the parents that watch our show. Is like, look at how an Olympian puts no pressure on their kids to be an Olympian. Really important lesson, right? Like, no, because it's there, right? It's there. It's a whole nother show. Olympic dads.
Yeah. You just tell them you could do this too if you can be as crazy as mom and dad were.
Yeah.
And we'll say at Steve's house this summer, seeing all of our kids like be around kids where all the dads were Olympians, they were all kind of like, "Oh, you got a crazy dad too."
Yeah.
All right. Well, Shnobi one Kenobi, the Bow Jedi, Olympic bronze medalist, environmental savior, fantastic father, and sure as hell a fast friend. We really appreciate you launching season 3, sharing your Midwest politeness and a quest that really is just choosing adventure over results all the way to one hell of a result. My dear friend, thank you for coming on the show. You're always welcome.
You bet, you guys.
Yeah,
keep up the good work.
The fantastic Matt Schnobrich, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
That's all for today's show. Fast Friends is a Metal Factory production. All opinions expressed are our own and those of our guests. If you like our show, follow along and subscribe with us wherever you get your content and podcasts. Thanks for listening.